I know very little about anything, but what I do know is that if you can live your life without an audience, you should do it.
Your favorite artist is broke or financially strapped in some capacity. I mean, aren't we all? But yes, whether you're into fashion or music or dance or film, there's always been a weird relationship between art and commerce since the two things have existed. But I do feel like we're at a really weird but interesting and maybe hopefully turning point across all of these industries. And I think the parallels and similarities between them are pretty interesting. It's also New York Fashion Week at the time of me recording this. And going to events and that sort of thing reminds me of all the parallels there are across different art forms. And also, it reminds me of the dark side of glamour, which is one of my favorite things to explore. I think so much of the foundation of the creative space is supposedly based on vulnerability, but ironically, you have to be sort of dishonest to portray an image to the level to where you can maybe afford that vulnerability as your full-time existence. Hi, I'm Kate. I make music and I talk about things I love, and there's so much to get into on this topic. So let's pop right in. So the way I want to do this is I want to kind of like take a bubble from each little industry, and then I'll probably expand a lot more on music because that's something I can speak to a lot more of as someone who understands these struggles firsthand and hears a lot more about them behind the scenes with artists, etc. So, since it's Fashion Week, I feel like it's only fitting to start with the wreckage of trying to be a sustainable designer, not just from an environmental standpoint. There's a whole environmental diaspora we could talk about when it comes to creating physical garments, and that applies to any industry, right? Like, hello, merch, but also, I love supporting artists, love Ethel Kane, yeah, and where that burden lies. But we're focusing on finances today. So I really want to spotlight this New York Times feature of Elena Velez, who's a widely regarded designer, has been worn by so many different celebrities, is very, very hot. This is one of the main pieces that sparked the idea for this video and is just so eye-opening of how big the gully is between what we think success looks like and what it is actually like a lot of times, unfortunately, on the ground, and how a lot of that burden is transferred directly onto the artist. So this is about Elena. She had been named Emerging Designer of the Year at the CDFA Awards, the industry's version of the Oscars. What more could the 28-year-old designer want? Well, money. There was $370 in her account, and I made a $400 sale 2 hours ago, she explained, meaning that she had been in the red this morning. Wow. To add to that, the triumphant runway show held in a Brooklyn warehouse and opened by a model musician who lurched-walked as she'd been summoned from hell cost Miss Velez company almost $40,000, most of which came from her mother's retirement account. Holy moly. I can already hear silly people being like, well, why don't you just do something else? You know, why? I feel like people who say that do not understand the magnitude of how much she had to go through just to get to that point. Like, being honored at the CDFA Awards is huge. That's like, she is at the height of her game, and she has to take money from her mother's retirement account. Like, something does not sit right there, even if, yes, Elena could do something else. But she's clearly a very talented and skilled designer who is changing the way that we think and experience fashion and culture to some degree. And it's just sad that she has to continue worrying about survival. We see so many exciting designers come and go for this reason, or just never get to continue their work in some capacity. We see weird collaborations with already established brands. We see indie or exciting emerging designers take on big houses as creative directors for this reason. I don't know a whole lot about this stuff, but I highly recommend checking out. There's just a couple of other style fashion YouTubers who do a much better job of understanding and explaining what the industry of fashion is like. So I would encourage to check them out. We've got to talk about the film industry now. Just like anyone else, I am feeling strapped on Netflix. Okay, I cannot watch the Lachey's ruin 8 more lives anymore. I would love to consume some quality cinema, but I am so happy to wait. Well, not so happy to wait, because I wish we could just realize it's like a nice, decent human thing to like pay actors and writers like what they need to survive as a given. But yeah, what I'm saying is the strikes are happening right now. We all know that. I think one of the most impactful pieces was talking about the residual checks, or the lack thereof, for both actors, but screenwriters especially. I feel like it's really tough to make a living that way, even if you're at a very, very high level. For example, one of the stars from the Orange is the New Black said that although Orange is the New Black went on to become Netflix's most watched original production, with 105 million users tuning into episodes, workers were so underpaid that they had to take blue-collar work on the side. Last month, she made a measly $27.30 in residuals. But we see pay transparency. I feel like pay transparency is a good thing. I feel like it's a great thing. And I think people should know, like, if you're going to dedicate your entire life to this thing, you should know that these are the sacrifices that you will have to make, not just emotionally, not just mentally and physically, but like financially. You might not be able to support having a family, having a certain level of comfort. And we're not talking about like, you know, I think everybody gets mad when artists are like, oh, money is hard, because you're portrayed such a distortive image of what like fame and success is, and like that is like the top 0.01% of artists who have the ability to live more than comfortably, but for the rest of everyone, it's really rough. We have another actor who was a lead on a show called Rutherford Falls, earning $33 and residuals. I just thought this tweet was funny, darkly funny, but yeah. As a musician, you always hear the joke like, what do pizza box, what does a pizza and a musician have in common? And oh no, damn, I got the joke wrong. It's what's different between a pizza and a musician? And the punchline is one can feed a family of 4. So I feel like I couldn't dig up a whole lot about the visual art world, that sort of thing. Illustrators, painters, sculptor, or that, I guess that's not physical art. But if you are someone who engages in those mediums, I'd love to be pointed into a direction where I could read more about that or learn more about that through your personal experience. But I do feel like visual artists, because a lot of their work is tied to a product, or a tangible product, automatically have the immediate pressure of trying to commodify their work as soon as possible and package it into a product, which I think is difficult on most artists' hearts. All right, dance. Dance is a weird thing in that there's not really a clear point to extract value monetarily other than a performance, but even a performance, right? You're splitting that across an entire company after funds for the venue and everything else. I can see why. Strapped for cash. And also just how intense the toll is on your body. A couple of years back, I watched that documentary following Bobby Jean Smith, which was incredible. I do remember there were some points in the film where someone at her level was just struggling to make ends meet. Smith said, "I feel really lucky, but even with the celebrity she now has, thanks in part to her success of the wide-reaching documentary, the path of being an independent choreographer has not been easy." In the Upper East Side apartment of an art collecting couple, Smith and some of the artists she's enlisted for the piece performed in the intimate living room setting before asking the well-heeled art patron audience for donations. Patronage is nothing new. Leonardo, Da Vinci, all of these other people throughout history had to find their money from other people. But I do think the way we relate to monetary value of art has shifted, and I would argue somewhat devalued with how accessible it's become and how widespread it is. And that's not to say that I don't want art to be democratized. I'm so thankful that it is. That's the only way that I am able to make my music, is that I grew up in a time where I could download Ableton when I was in high school and just learn through YouTube videos. I think that's wonderful, but we just kind of missed I don't know, there's just so many layers to it, but it's just sad to see that the distribution of wealth and value attributed to different art forms, I don't feel like has come hand in hand with the access to it, if that makes sense. All right. And now I'm so glad we get to talk about the financial ruin that is the music industry. Wow. Now, I have a lot to say about this, so buckle up. The figure that I love to bring up, especially when I'm with someone who loves music but doesn't really have an understanding of how bad it's gotten, is using these lovely stream royalty calculators. Now, a couple things to keep in mind. This is for one streaming platform. You're probably pulling in revenue from multiple streaming platforms, but I am also assuming that the artist is earning 100% of their royalties, and that unfortunately is highly unlikely, especially on this level that I am about to share. Even I, by using a distribution company that is not automatically open to the public, I forego 15% of my royalties, and I am still such a small bean. I like to think it all evens out. But even so, okay, let's say you live in New York City or LA, somewhere where to some degree it really, really helps to live here if you're an artist, because you get to meet the artists, you get to play to the people, all of these things. If you get 1 million streams, 1 million streams a month, 1 million, let that sink in, 1 million. You are earning less than New York City's minimum wage. What exactly? I think that holds plenty of info on its own. I think it's also really important to realize that the payout from streaming platforms, and this isn't the only problem, but it's certainly a chunk of the pie, has continued to go down over the years. Yeah, I think a lot of artists, especially on my level, who are trying to, make it, become so singularly focused on making it that they forget that, like, hey, even if you get to that level of success, it might not get easier at all. You might not feel any relief financially. If anything, it might be worse because now you're at a level where your clout or your size of your audience demands more of your attention and more of your creativity and time and whatever that you can't squeeze in the day job. And so you get in a position where you are really dependent on an advance, which is just a glorified loan. And it's just so precarious financially. One band that I think is doing a really awesome job of this is Lawrence, started by two siblings, but they're doing this whole docu-series like sharing what it's like to be on tour. And there's this one particular episode that I'm going to share some clips from that I think talk about the Ticketmaster Live Nation situation very well.
Live Nation's a monopoly. I've been through this too. Check it out. These are the things I'm not afraid to say. And then it just so happens that you fast forward a year and you guys are talking before the Senate.
The tickets were listed at $30 and our pay ended up shaking out to about $12 of each ticket. The fan paid $42 because Ticketmaster tacked on a 40% fee. But whereas Live Nation's costs were already covered at this point in the calculation, we still need to pay for our touring costs. So that leaves us with $6 for an 8-piece band, pre-tax, and we also have to pay our own health insurance.
The reins of ticket production and sourcing venues in the United States has become a monopoly, which is not cool. And I'm glad people are talking about it because fans don't know. All we see is like, why are tickets for this artist so expensive? I don't understand. And now because of that reason, I can only afford to see one artist this year. I can't see 4 artists who I'd love to support, but I don't have the money to do that. Nobody wins. Miley Cyrus also shared how to get her tour to a level that she wanted. You know, this is Miley Cyrus. She funded the entire Bangers tour herself. She didn't make a dime on it. I think people do not understand how difficult touring is.
Saying, why are you doing this? You're going to do like 100 shows and you're not going to make any money. I said, there's no one I would rather invest in than myself. So I paid for it all to make it exactly what I thought I and the fans deserve.
There is this great article or just series of statements put out by Santigold. I've made several videos on this, but just talking about why she canceled her tour, even as like a legacy artist that was huge in her time in the indie scene. I mean, she continues to put out great work, but I'll just let her words do the talking. The other thing that people don't realize was the amount of money we make. Some of that goes to your management, your agent, your business manager, your lawyer. That's 40% off of the top of what you make plus taxes. That's almost unsustainable in itself. I think I'm going to shift focus, and I think that's what a lot of people are going to have to do. And I think that's really sad for music, and it's really sad for art. True. First, I took my 2-year-old on the road. Then I had twins in 2018 and we hit the road in the same year. I was on the stage 4 months after I had twins. And why? Because there's not really another option. If you don't do it, you're going to lose relevance. You're going to lose momentum. You're going to be out of the public eye for too long. I will not continue to sacrifice myself for an industry that has become unsustainable for and uninterested in the welfare of the artists it is built upon. I need that on a t-shirt. Love it. These career paths do not provide financial stability, but they also do not provide the time for you to be a person, have a family. I was at a music conference recently and I asked this question. I was so thankful for some of these women like being so loud and proud about motherhood as musicians, because I feel like for me as someone who does want to have kids, it is very scary that that opportunity might be swallowed up whole by this other thing that you love so much. And the only advice they really had to share was like, it's incredibly hard and we just do it. And yeah, it's just this culture of somebody's always replaceable. So I think last year was really interesting in that we saw several artists cancel tours. We saw Arlo Parks. We saw Justin Bieber cancel tour for mental health. I love that. I think that's great for the artists. Fans are not always as understanding, but it makes sense to me. Even if an artist is selling out shows, especially if those are like small cap rooms, that does not mean that they are taking away any money from that show. I think, and that was something that was huge for me to learn about. I think in part because of inflation and production costs, but also the way that venues pay artists and actually what they collect from artists has changed a lot. A spreadsheet of how much of a cut. This was not something that happened before. It just started happening. And venues are charging, they're taking a hefty percentage of merch sold at their venues, even when the artists are bringing people to their venues. And, you know, a lot of times I think artists are validly like, if you're going to do that, shouldn't we get a cut of your bar sales? It just makes no sense, but it's so normalized. And because the industry is so oversaturated, and, you know, I think a lot of artists are just really excited to play, do the thing, be a rock star. It happens. So you can see in this graph, there's like 20% soft, 10% hard. What that means, so soft goods are like t-shirts, hats, clothing, those sorts of things, stuff you wear, while as hard goods are like CDs, vinyls, that sort of thing. As you can see, I mean, 20%, even 10% is a ton on an artist's income when you're already talking about like you have to hire a person to showcase your merch, and you have to account for like local tax and transporting all of those goods, and it's wild. I'll stop talking about music in a second, but I also am so excited that there's been more of a crackdown on streaming fraud. There's an Ari's Take episode on this that I highly recommend listening to, but there's a lot of murky stuff here, right? We had like the fake jazz artist scandal that supposedly allegedly happened. There was just a report that multiple criminal gang members confirmed they used Spotify for money laundering. I don't even know how they did that, but that's fascinating. Streaming platforms have a long way to go in figuring out exactly where royalty payments are going and disseminating that back to the artists and the people who actually created the music. But I think the most relatable thing for artists, including myself, is I think a lot of PR people, unfortunately, maybe they know or maybe they don't know, end up accidentally hiring playlisters or promotion people who use like these bot farms or fake streams, and that not only hurts the reputation of the promoter but also of the artist. I personally worked with someone on one of my singles that I was really excited about. I have this song called Your Daughter's Dead, cheery, and this person, you know, they told me all the right things. They said, yeah, we can do this. I know this person. We're going to do all these things. Blah, 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 blah. Anyway, when the day came around, they sent me a report of some of the independent playlists they had gotten my music on. And they included 3 of those that I know personally. I reached out to the curator. So they were taking credit for my work, and then B, I was on all these playlists that were clearly botted. It was an insubordinate amount of likes on the playlist. There's a bunch of artists who I've never heard of. It seems like it rotates very often, and I was like, hey, what is this? I don't understand. And they just stopped responding to me because at this point I had already paid them. And, you know, I reached out to Spotify and I was like, I don't want to be on this playlist. You know, it's a mess and it happens all too often. And unfortunately, it makes it very hard for me to trust anyone who shows any interest in my music, because it's like, how would I know that you actually know someone? And how would I know that even if you know someone, that means you have a good working relationship with that someone? And how would I know why would I take your word? What are you getting out of this? You know, besides money. You just have to be really careful. And there's a lot of bad actors out there, and I'm sure that transcends across every creative industry or any industry where there is a coveted position or lifestyle, I guess.
My identity is attached to the success of this and those numbers.
Yeah.
I had this period of feeling like I was a failure. I wasn't capable. The thing that I made in the past was the only thing that I would ever be known for.
Yeah.
Creative industries are shifting more and more into, it's kind of a requirement to monetize your personality in some form. And because if you think about it, like, I can speak to music. I was just talking about this the other day. 100,000 songs are uploaded to like Spotify every day. Okay. It's kind of crazy to expect someone to listen to your song just because, you know, when they know nothing about you, they've never heard of you, you haven't had an impact on their life. So hence content. And I think that can be really hard when that's tied to your income, and inevitably how you present yourself is like tied to your self-worth to some degree. And yeah, it's hard to see sometimes. I just watched this Lori Hills video about this, about
I can no longer rely on sponsor or AdSense support, at least in the financial sense.
trying to make content that works better so that she can support her family. And while I appreciate the honesty, it's tough to see sometimes. There's inevitable tolls of fame because with the high, there is the low. Anthony Padilla's interview of OG YouTubers, I think, was great for this. I'll try and include some clips here.
I like had all these little cracks, and then when everything sort of like exploded overnight, those cracks became big old canyons because everything was exacerbated. If you're watching and you're trying to get into content because you see a bunch of people living cool lives and you see all the money and the cars and like it's like, honestly, that's
Look them in the fucking eyes, bro.
you are watching. Here's something, if you just go by this rule, right?
Yeah.
Everything you see from your favorite content creators is put there by that content creator for you to see. And it's all done in a way to promote themselves and make themselves appear a certain way. And it is so detrimental for us as viewers to watch those people and go like, whoa, he's living such a great life. I got to do whatever I can to like live that kind of life. And it's not as good as it may seem.
It's a sad snowball, right? Like pain that isn't transformed is transmitted. I'm a quote girly. I love a good quote. I don't think it's with bad intentions, but in my industry and other creative industries, it's just kind of the norm It's kind of norm to not pay other creative collaborators or lowball other creative collaborators simply because I think a lot of artists can't afford it, but it's not fair, and it doesn't feel great asking someone to do something that you know they deserve more value. And it's a cycle that perpetuates itself. So yeah, super uplifting video, Kate. Yeah, I know. I'm a cherub, man. But I do feel like it's important to talk about. I think part of the reason why it's gone so bad is because we're supposed to perpetuate this pedestal of like wealth and success and but that's not what it's like. And I think that developing artists and also fans have a vested interest in knowing that the artists who have impacted my life have done so in such an immense way that it hurts my feelings that they can't support their children, or themselves for that matter. We are in a great time where I feel like we're kind of refactoring the fan to artist relationship and kind of starting to reconsider how we consume content and interact with culture. And that's really exciting to see. I love there seems to be more of a culture of transparency. But I think the biggest thing that I've pulled away through all of this, and also just my personal journey as an artist, is to encourage people to truly love the stage where they're at. Because one, it probably, fame or success or whatever is probably not going to give you what you think it's going to give you. If you're not contented now, like that's not going to get better. And also just like from a logistic standpoint, you might be worse off financially as you grow, which is so counterintuitive, but I just think it's an important consideration, and artists have a right to know of like what they're getting into. I think when you know what you're getting into, it's easier to draw those boundaries around what you're willing to sacrifice and what you're not willing to sacrifice. And I think it also enables us creatives who are working day jobs to kind of have more of a perspective of like, wow, you know, maybe I don't have that big deal or whatever, or maybe I'm not on this stage or whatever. But like at the end of the day, like I'll speak to myself, like I can make whatever I want. That is freedom. I have a roof over my head that I'm so happy to be where I am and have the relationships in my life that I do have. And like, that's numero uno, baby. And like, I feel like that's, if anything's going to service my art, it's going to be being a sustainable human, in my humble opinion. Thank you so much for watching. It's been so cool to like have a platform to do this and like start to, I don't know, find more of a discussion situation with you random people on the internet. So thank you. I've really been enjoying like having time to make, or carving out time to make these things. And also it's just crazy to me that like anyone would listen to me like talk to myself about something that I'm like very hyper focusedly into for several minutes. So thank you. I know everyone's attention is precious in these sorts of days, and I don't know. Thank you. But yeah, do what makes you happy and do what keeps you being the best you. I should just stop talking, so I'm gonna do that. Thanks for watching. Bye.